Thank you everybody for joining us. This is a great and unique experience for us tonight. This is Villij Talks. Just quickly, the Villij is a wellness organization that really shows up for women of color in all ways, through movement, conversation, and really just inspiration at the end of the day. Our Villij Talk really explores the sides of wellness, such as, from nutrition to therapy to meditation. We've really tried to hit all parts of the wellness industry, especially with women of color who are representing for us. Just a little bit of house rules before we begin. This talk will last about an hour. We'll be using the chat to ask a bunch of questions for everybody watching. And at the end, we'll do a Q&A for about, let's get started. So I'm Chanel, I'm co-founder of The Villij and community manager. So half the time when you guys are sliding in the DMs, you're talking to me. And tonight I'm joined by Kristin Winchester, who is a certified therapist from Washington, D.C. And she is also the founder of Her Therapy Space, which is a physical space in D.C. for all millennial women seeking therapy. How are you tonight, Kristin?
I am good. I am good. Thank you so much for having me in this space. I'm excited to have this conversation because, like you said, it is timely, and I think we really need to start talking about this stuff more and creating conversation around it in our communities.
Big time. Yeah, so tonight we're going to be exploring racial trauma and what that means to our communities, how it's affecting us in real ways, and how we can kind of move along from it. So I do see that we have some people here from Vancouver, LA, Toronto, Montreal. So this is great. This is great. I'm really excited to have you all here. But Kristin, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what prompted you to become a therapist?
So I have been in the mental health field since I finished my undergrad degree in 2007, and then I took a break in between, and then ended up going to graduate school in 2011 for forensic psychology. So I have a master's in forensic psychology, and my intention was to work with offenders in the criminal justice system, doing individual and group therapy there. And I did that work for a little bit of time in my career. And that pretty much was something that I was passionate about, because when I was probably like middle school, I believe it was middle school or early high school, I had a childhood friend get murdered by another one of my friends. And because of that, that was a jarring experience for me. That was my first real experience with, violence and murder, like directly in my neighborhood. And it really had me thinking, why the heck did he do the things that he did? What made him take someone else's life? And I think from there, like, I was just so curious into how people behaved and what made them, tick, and how thoughts and emotions and all that play into our behaviors. So I really was interested in psychology and, like I said, the criminal justice system. And then it's interesting that I ended up doing that work because I originally started off as chemical engineering major in college. Yeah. I don't know how I ended up in that, but that's how I ended up. That's where I ended up. And then ultimately I was like, why am I doing this? This is not what I'm really passionate about, and had to switch lanes. And I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah. And it's crazy how traumatic experiences can kind of force you out of your comfort zone or force you to be interested in certain things.
Right.
So I could completely resonate with that. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of trauma as a child, and I feel like it's forced me to want to find healthy connections with people. So,
Yeah.
I mean, hence the Village, I find it's really important to have those real like reciprocated and uplifting connections, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you define what racial trauma means?
Yeah, so it is essentially when we experience psychological symptoms from any form of racism, any experiences that we have. So whether that's, discrimination on a job in the workplace, everyday microaggressions, whether that's hate crimes and violence, those attacks on us, just because of the color of our skin, and how those play a role in our mental health and in the way we, cope and things like that. So essentially, it's those, like I said, those psychological symptoms that we experience as a result of, these racist acts that we have to deal with from day to day.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. So how does it affect the people in our communities?
Has a tremendous effect on our communities, right? Because like I said, these are things that a lot of us, experience on a day-to-day basis. So much so that we're kind of like numb to it at points in times.
Yeah.
And I know that I've, recognized in our communities and also within myself, like not being trusting, being suspicious, being on guard, feeling more comfortable when I am around my community and people who look like me. So not feeling comfortable in, places where I'm like really the minority, and just having distrust when it comes to the government and, these institutions that are set up, ultimately designed to, keep us oppressed and to discriminate against us and things like that. So that sense of distrust, that suspicion, like I said, heightened psychological impacts, definitely. So anger, sadness, frustration, feelings of hopelessness and things like that. And that increased sense of stress, right? Because it's stressful. I mean, honestly, it is stressful living as a Black, I can only speak to my lived experience, but as a Black woman in America, it is stressful every single day. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I decided to do my own thing and be a business owner, because of, the experiences that I've had in the workplace and things like that. I've seen increased drug and alcohol usage as a means to cope with all of these things that occur, right? From, like I said, the daily microaggressions and things like that, and the violence against us, the police brutality. Like, we turn to different ways of coping, the best that we can. We try to cope the best that we can. And sometimes it's those substances that give us that sense of, coping.
Yeah. I mean, I see this even in my own family. We talk a lot about Canada and how Canada's this nice space and like we don't deal with racism. We deal with it often. When my uncle was about 13, I remember hearing stories of him being harassed while playing basketball with his friends by the police. They harassed them so often that they actually knew them all by name. And then in the 80s, there was a cab driver that got stabbed near my grandmother's house.
Wow.
They picked up my uncle and tried to get the guy to say it was my uncle. So we've had this trauma in our family. So whenever we see police, we weren't to say hello.
Right.
We weren't to get too close. We were to avert our eyes. So,
yeah,
it's ingrained in us. We deal with it. And a lot of our friends of other backgrounds wouldn't realize the stress and the everyday realities that we've been dealing with.
Right. And we're supposed to trust in this institution, right, to protect and serve.
Yeah.
And I just don't trust. I do not trust the police.
Yeah.
So that's something that, is prevalent in the community. Like we oftentimes don't call the police. That's not our first thought, to call the police when we're in trouble, when things are going awry.
Yeah.
Because as the victims, we're often, looked at as the suspects, unfortunately, just because of the color of our skin. It just really baffles me. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
And it's really, really sad, that these are our lived experiences. And that just weighs so heavy on us, individually and collectively. And also something that I wanted to bring up is a lot of times, there are some behavioral changes, like I said, anger and rage are things that are normal, normal emotions when we're, going through these traumas and, trying to navigate life and not getting any assistance in the system and things like that. And knowing that the system is against us, I'm angry. And oftentimes that anger, behaviors come from anger, so that's where, you get the increased violence and, just doing things to make ourselves feel like we are in control, and appearing as we're tough and taking care of things. And that is often stems from not having that, sense of control in our day-to-day in this world.
And it presents itself in micro ways, and it presents itself in macro ways, right?
Yeah.
So, I deal with trauma every day, but I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to wear it on my shoulder or on my forehead. Nobody would know unless we're having these type of conversation.
Yeah.
And another thing to point out is, it doesn't just, it happens for the Black community, as we're seeing, but it's happening for a lot of different people of color. Most specifically in Canada, we have a large Indigenous population, and they deal with trauma. They're dealing with trauma every day. And that's based on how the system has treated them.
Right.
So as a therapist, how has this presented in your own sessions with your clients?
Yeah, so I've noticed that my clients, right, especially over these last few weeks, it's been tense. It's been, that high-end level of, trauma when it comes to, race relations and things like that, with everything that's going on in the climate of the world right now. So a lot of what I've been seeing is, low motivation, not wanting to do much, right? Not wanting to show up, feelings of hopelessness, feeling like when will we ever be able to live, freely in our Black bodies, without having to deal with these things day in and day out, and just being tired, emotionally drained, emotionally exhausted, physically tired, feeling physical symptoms from the stress and the anxiety and things like that, tightening in the chest, headaches, not being able to sleep at night. I've seen a lot of people's sleep being impacted because of everything that's going on. Having nightmares, having flashbacks of their own, racial related traumas and things like that. Fear. It's the list I can go on and on with the things that I've experienced myself, and the things that I've seen in my clients, and how it manifests itself. And it's just so draining, that the fact that we have to, like I said, deal with this while we're just trying to live our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to have all this heavy weight that we carry on a daily basis, and we get tired.
Yeah. So for the members in our chat, please let us know what your own experience with racial trauma is. I have so many. I won't get into them all. I grew up in upstate New York, actually, and I lived in North Carolina for a bit, but that's not where my trauma stemmed from. I find just often I was always that like tokenized one, like, oh, my friend's Black, or let's go tanning. Oh, you can't tan, you know, like I would have all these things to just remind me that nobody would understand what it's like to be in my skin. And it was difficult. And for a lot of reasons, I guess, I kind of played myself down a little bit until I got a little older, until I was at the end of high school or mid high school. I started to get a little more comfortable in my skin, but you know, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. So can you talk to us a little bit about secondhand trauma? Because I feel like I'm personally dealing with it. Like you said before, it manifests in your body, you're tired. Me and my partner have been exhausted lately.
Yeah.
Like I was looking, just kind of prepping for our conversation today, and I was like, you know, maybe it's because of all the images we're seeing. And it's actually, as much as we're talking about it, but we're not talking about how we feel about what we're seeing. And I feel like just because we're holding it in, we're exhausted. We nap every day. We don't usually nap every day. And why do we need to nap? We're staying at home all the time. You know what I mean?
Listen, last week I was taking 3 to 5 naps a day. 3 to 5 naps a day. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's emotionally draining.
Yes. So I've been feeling so depleted lately, and that secondhand trauma is what a lot of us have been experiencing collectively with, you know, that indirect exposure to what's going on in the world, right? Because it's not directly happening to us per se, but we feel it. We feel it as if it was someone that we knew, you know, because the fact of the matter is, it could be any one of us. It could be someone that we knew, you know.
Exactly.
And that weight is heavy.
Yeah. So somebody in our chat had said, my experience with domestic violence and how the police treated a family member story whose life ended. The life got taken away by a partner. Sorry, I'm stumbling on my words here, a little tired. So I could completely understand that. Another one said, at this current time, my trauma is at work.
Yeah, a lot of workplace trauma.
Anti-Black racism is being denied. Somebody else said, I wish I could sleep.
Right.
Somebody else that I know very well said sexual objectification from a teenager to present. You know, just comments about her being Latina and how, you know, she looks and, you know, how she must be. Somebody else said being considered a good Black throughout my childhood, going from pet to threat in the workplace.
I don't know why, but like tears are welling up right now. Because I could connect to each and every one that you know, that everyone is sharing. You know, I resonate with so much of that. And
it's a lot.
It is. It's heavy.
Somebody else said microaggressions in the workplace as the only woman of color. So I can really speak to that. I am the only Black person in my department, only Black woman on the side of my huge office. We have one other woman that we barely see. And a lot of times I feel uncomfortable. I saw this amazing article about this girl and her life as living between the projects and the richest part of Toronto, and she's a Black girl. and her grandparents founded a company that our insurance company actually insures. So I wanted to share it with my co-workers, but I was like, I don't know if I should, because it's about race matters, and nah, I'm just not going to talk about it. And why?
Wow. Right.
Why should I feel this way? You know?
Yeah.
You know, somebody pointed out that it could be any one of us.
Any one of us.
Said, any one of us, and it's so real.
And that's why we feel so deeply.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's really an exhausting thing, and I really appreciate you all for sharing and and living through this every day, and actually striving and still getting those promotions, and still, you know, starting your business, and still doing so much, because at the end of the day, we've all had to experience, our ancestors experienced this. This is nothing new, and sadly, it's not gone yet. So yeah, if you can talk to me about secondhand trauma and what it looks like.
Yeah, so some of the same things that, you know, we mentioned earlier, but, you know, that chronic fatigue, like just feeling so drained, right? Yeah. And like you said, it's like we're being triggered constantly, you know, with social media, the news, and having to engage in this, and the videos being on replay, and watching someone lose their life on camera. It's just horrifying, you know? So lack of sleep, fearfulness, the anxiety, you know, that feelings of stress. And like I said, feeling physical aches and pains in your body, not being able to focus, having, you know, poor concentration, like whether, like having to go to work and having to focus, like what? Like, why are we expected to go on business as usual when we are grieving? Feeling detached, apathy, and feelings of sadness, of course, heaviness.
And thank you for touching on all of that, because I had to take a mental health day off. I had to. There was no way I could care about insurance during a time like this. There's no way when I'm explaining to my daughter that he didn't have to do anything to die. The fact that I have to put a burden on a 13-year-old shoulders for her to feel like she has to be an advocate in her circles, it's hard, and it's draining, and it's really disheartening to have to go on and smile and be part of these Zoom meetings and these Microsoft Teams meetings. Pretend like I care, and
I do not care.
Here today, I just want to shut off. I want to take time for me, and I urge you all to do that. If you feel like the weight is on your shoulders, because I mean, at the end of the day, it is. You're watching images of people being murdered, shot with rubber bullets. You know, especially for the Americans. I mean, it hits us here too. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, places are being burned down. You know, we're in a state of turmoil. And on top of that, we have to deal with COVID still.
We're in a freaking pandemic. On top of this pandemic of racism, I mean, it's too much. It is too much.
It's too much. 2020 is canceled anyhow, but we'll speak about that later. Let's talk a little bit about grief. I find right now, like, grief, we're dealing with grief in so many different ways. Like, we have those moments of denial. We have those moments of anger. We get depressed. We're bargaining, like, okay, I used to feel like, oh, well, I'm a Black woman, so maybe I won't deal with all the issues that the Black males are dealing with as much, because maybe I'm not seen as a threat because I'm a woman. So maybe if I smile a little more, or maybe if I, show that I'm not threatening or not angry or not, like, really just trying to overcompensate and be the funny one in the room. So and then I accept, like, listen, they're not gonna mess with me no matter what. It doesn't matter. Some will, of course. And there's great people everywhere, police, lawyer, everything. There's great people in every discipline. But yeah, I feel like this trauma is manifesting a lot of grief. What does that look like from a Black experience?
I know, I feel, I don't know if this is like fact or, research, but I feel as a collective, as a community, we're constantly grieving something. Like it's like a never ending state of mourning. And I feel like we don't have time to go through all of the stages, because it's just, like I said, something new every single day, every single hour. And we're constantly having to express grief, but not having the proper space, I think, to fully grieve.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of times people, like you mentioned, the stages of grief, I see a lot of times people getting stuck in that anger phase, or, wanting to deny it, and avoid, coming to terms with how they feel around this loss. And they get, like I said, they kind of get stuck there, because a lot of times they don't know what it looks like to properly grieve.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're just constantly grieving so many things and don't have time to take time to heal.
Yeah.
We really don't have time to heal, before something else is happening.
That's
like there's been multiple incidents that has happened since George Floyd.
Yeah.
And it's like, can we catch a break?
Yeah.
Can we catch a break,
And that's the thing. Our communities are really resilient. No matter your background, we've dealt with it all. We've dealt with it all, and we've gotten through it all. But there's something to be said about having to deal with new things before healing from the old things.
Yeah.
How do we even start? How do we even start? It's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot, and I think it's important with the work that you all are doing right now, and, the line of work that I'm in, and creating more spaces for people to share their experiences and to connect with people who can feel what they're experiencing, like truly understand. And it starts by acknowledging that those feelings are there.
Yeah.
Because like I said, a lot of times people get wrapped up in the avoidance, denial stage. And it's really taking, coming to terms with, okay, this is how I'm actually feeling. What does this even mean? What does this look like? What am I feeling truly? And then from labeling how you feel, right, you can actually start thinking about steps that you can take towards healing. But you have to acknowledge it. You can't keep operating out of denial, and I know that's a coping mechanism, a way to cope, right? Because we have to push through and keep moving and be strong. And, it's easy to just act as if everything is okay. Yeah. But we have to be okay with not being okay. It starts there. Yeah. That's where the healing starts.
Yeah. So can you all in the chat let me know, how has the imagery on the media, on television, on the news, on social media, how has it affected your mental health? And while they're answering that, can you talk to us about what forms of racial microaggressions that we see in present day society? I think we've touched it a little bit, but I'd like to go a little deeper into that.
Yeah, and especially a lot of what I've been seeing in the midst of everything that's going on is color blindness. Like, I don't see color,
No, I see color when I see people.
Right. I don't see color when I look at you, What?
Yeah.
what? I am a Black person, and I want you to, recognize me, see me, fully see me, um, asking people where they are from. Like, where are you from? As if, like, I was born in America. Like, I've never lived anywhere else, and people asking where I'm from is as if, I have no right to be here. Talking about or asking about your hair, like natural hair and our hair and things like that. Is that all your hair? Or, oh, you change your hair up often, can I touch your hair? As a Black woman, I've experienced all of that. Not being allowed to really fully express our emotions and our range of emotions, right, as human beings. Not being able to express our opinions, and it's a lot. Getting followed in stores, the assumption that you are a worker in the store. Like, I'm shopping just like you.
Yeah, I've gotten that a lot, like, especially when I'm at Zara, and I like to wear all Black often, and they're like, okay, so can you get me this? And I'm like, no, girl, you see, I have my purse. I have my purse. And there's a lot of like tone policing. My friend, one of my good friends right now, is dealing with that at work. They were trying to express how they felt, and the CEO was like, I'm offended that you are all speaking like this.
Wow.
And I mean, it's going to turn into something a little bigger than what he assumed that they would do. But, it's hard. You can't express yourselves. Like, especially with me, like I said, I'm one of the only Black people at work. I can't speak to but one person about how I feel right now. Wow. Everybody else, it's business as usual. My deadlines, my deliverables, I need to have it. They're more complaining about COVID than they are about the state of emergency going on when it comes to the racial divide. So a lot of people are saying that they're emotionally drained from the media right now. They're depleted. It's traumatic to keep seeing and hearing these stories. Somebody said they cry every single day. Another said it makes them sick. And I can completely hear that. Also having very draining conversations with family members, friends who don't seem to understand the depth of the issue. And I could completely, it's hard because do I want to talk about it all the time? I don't think so. For me, it's like, sadly, I was around during Rodney King. Obviously, I didn't understand the gravity because I was young, but I do remember the images on the news. I do remember how people felt. I do remember the race war in LA and the riots happening in LA. So I was very aware of all those things at a young age. And I remember hearing families talk about Black men as if they were something to be scared of, in a sense. Or hearing that through my friends that their dads have said something. So, I've been aware of all of this since I was very young because unfortunately I had the burden and I had to. But I'm at the point, do I want to talk about, do I want you to bring it up? Do I not want you to bring it up?
Listen.
I appreciate allies and what they're doing right now. And the real ones are really mobilizing and trying to support our communities. But this is a big burden.
Yeah, and I was about to say, but please don't come to me asking, how can you help? What can I do?
Do your research.
Do the work.
Do the work.
Do the work. Don't come. It's not our burden to have to fix this broken system.
Yeah.
And that is even exhausting, getting the messages from people and, hey, how are you feeling? You know how I'm feeling. You know how I'm feeling.
Yeah. Or it's just I feel like everybody means well, but
Uh-huh.
this is our burden when we walk outside.
Yeah. Yep.
This is our everyday reality. This is
Yep.
something, that we deal with often. And, I'm afraid for my fiance to go outside.
Right.
And that's the
Right.
reality. I have to make sure he's not going over the speed limit because I don't need any headaches. I don't need any grief. I don't need any more
Yeah.
grief than what I'm dealing with.
Right. Right. And I hear a lot of people say, I'm afraid for our Black men and things like that, but it's women, children, babies, it don't matter. Like, if your skin is a certain color, it does not matter. We are all targets, and it just sickens me to have to, wrap my mind around that, but it's our reality. Unfortunately, it does not matter.
Yeah.
And it pisses me off,
Yeah. Yeah.
pisses me off.
It's
And
heavy.
yeah, and at times I feel hopeless. Like, is change ever going to happen?
Yeah.
Ever going to take place?
So you talked a little bit about that we need to begin to heal. But
Mm-hmm.
as a people, it's difficult to really honor our feelings and be in it because, we've been taught it's weak. We've been taught,
Yep.
that we have shit to accomplish. So
Right.
you
Yep.
need to, hold it in or do whatever you need to do to cope. But it's not always healthy. So
Right.
can you tell us in which ways we can allow ourselves to honor our feelings during this time?
You brought up a good point, right? Because at some point it's going to boil over,
Yeah.
right? When you keep trying to stuff it and stuff it and stuff it, at some point it's going to boil over, and we really have to shift the narrative. Like you said, it's seen as weak, and there's a bunch of stigma around caring for our mental health, but it's the same as our physical. Our brains are a part of our physical, makeup, and if our mental isn't on point, everything else starts to, crumble as a result. So, like I said, really taking out the time to keeping it 100 with yourself and being real. Like, I feel this way. I feel X, Y, and Z right now. And then a lot of times people struggle with even labeling how they feel, that, like I said, there's a range of emotions, but in the work that I do, and a lot of times, people don't really know how to put a label on how they feel. So it often comes out as anger, labeling it as anger, or, annoyance, or whatever it may be, sadness. But there is a range of emotions that we feel and experience. That acknowledgement, and I think right now, during this time, taking out the time to process how you feel. And I do a lot of that through writing, through journaling.
Yes. Really
getting real with myself, getting to know myself more on paper. No one's there to judge. No one's, there to, criticize whatever it is I may feel or whatever I may say. So that's a safe space to start with getting in touch with how you feel, what's going through your mind, checking in with yourself. Like, a lot of times we don't take the time to just check in with ourselves, because like you said, we're so on the go, and we have to keep pushing and things like that. So normalizing those check-ins with ourselves, and starting to put a label on how we feel, like learning how to label those things and put a name to it. And I think, as we're talking about racial trauma, right, naming this is huge, because, like I said, a lot of us experience these things day to day. When we walk out the door, right, we're being judged, we're being, harmed and discriminated against, and everything is happening, but we don't take the time to talk about these things often. Personally, in my community, in my circles, it comes up from time to time, right? But I think as a collective, we can create more space for us to have these
Yes.
experiences where we have conversations like this, right? And people can label how they feel and express how they feel in the chat and really, be transparent with one another. Sharing experiences, getting our feelings validated. We are not alone in this. We are not alone. And I think it's helpful to know that someone may be feeling the same way you're feeling.
Yeah.
Just having your feelings validated is huge. Is huge. And I think right now, more than ever, looking into how these traumas are impacting your day-to-day, like ability to show up, for yourself. And I'm not even talking about like showing up for work per se. Like, listen, I'm all for like, take your days. Like you say, you had to take some mental health days. Yeah. That's a part of, healing, knowing your limits, setting boundaries and upholding those boundaries. Right. And, what was I saying? Something about before I got in that rant of boundaries.
I feel you. It's a long day.
Yeah, it's a long day, and I could talk about this all day and night. But
yeah.
But really, it really starts with, like I said, labeling how we feel, creating space for us to have these conversations, setting boundaries where necessary. So that we can have that space to start processing our feelings and healing and not putting too much on our plate. Because with my clients, I see, with my millennial women of color, I see a lot of feeling like they have to be super women and be there for every single person. And then they shortchange themselves.
Yeah.
So we got to stop doing that, right? Because that takes away time for ourselves to deal with our own stuff. We can't be there for everyone when we aren't well.
Yep.
So we have to create those boundaries and say no when necessary. Getting involved in your community, I think, is huge, and contributes to having a strong sense of identity. Is important here, because these traumas and the racism can strip our identity and cause the low self-esteem and self-hatred and all of these things. So I think really getting back to the root, getting back to your roots, educating yourself, joining communities of color in your neighborhoods, and having events like this. That's why what you all do is so needed.
Because
you're connecting women of color all over and coming together and sharing with one another, and that is healing in itself. These events.
I'm not gonna lie. The Villij community is something both Kim and I needed in our lives. It's not that it's cute to have these little, yoga events and all these things and these conversations, but it's really stemmed from our own need to heal.
Yeah.
Our own need to heal. And another thing I would say, just to add to what Kristin was saying, was don't shy away from seeking help.
Yes.
I feel like
I was gonna get there.
Yeah, like a lot of the times we are like, no, I don't need therapy, or we try to make excuses like, oh, it's too expensive, or if there's a will, there's always a way. There's always a resource that you can find that will help suit you in your budget. It might not always look the way you want it to, but I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't have healed at all if I didn't go to therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy has been a great tool for me to become more articulate, to understand myself, to have a better relationship.
Yeah.
Right? With family, and having those real conversations with family that we were never able to have before because we were never taught how to do it,
Yeah. So, you're breaking cycles.
Yeah. So
it's seeking help.
Yes. And it's taught me so much. So graciously, I'm able to kind of pass that along to my daughter, who is extremely vocal and extremely aware. And, I'm going to be honest, she told me that she was emotionally exhausted from the news.
Wow.
What?
And you said she's 13?
Just turned 13. So,
Okay.
okay,
Good
so
work, Mom.
thank you. Thank you. So it's really important to, I mean, a lot of our people in our community might not have had children yet, but if you do the work now, if you do want to have a family later, you're going to bless that child. You are going to bless them with the knowledge and showing up as your most healthy self.
Right, because those generational traumas are real.
And
we have our own stuff to deal with, but we also have stuff from our ancestors and, other family members. And it's just so much. And doing the work, and seeking help is actually a strength. It shows strength, not weakness, to admit that you need help. We aren't meant to do anything on this earth alone. Right? And if you sit down and ask yourself and be real with yourself, have I tried to make some changes in this area that I want to see changes in on my own and haven't really seen any results? What am I waiting for? What am I afraid of? Right? And it starts by taking that first leap of faith, and betting on yourself, investing in yourself, and the well-being for generations to come after you. By you saying yes to getting help. It's powerful.
So honestly, I don't even think, like, I told my partner, like, we need to go to therapy before we get married. And he's like, why we need therapy? And I'm like, we have no issues, but it's really about learning proper communication skills. And I'm glad that I did the work by myself first, so then we could do the work together.
But a lot of times people think that you have to be so broken to get help from a therapist. It's preventative care. The same way you go to a doctor and get a physical and get your checkups and things like that. It's the same. You're going to therapy and getting help now so that you don't have these breakdowns later. So it doesn't become an issue, later down the line.
Exactly.
And I think reframing how you think about therapy is imperative, for more people to start seeking help. And I've definitely seen strides in the Black community with, normalizing getting help and caring for our mental health. So we still got a ways to go, but I'm just glad that a lot more people are being vocal, being transparent, sharing their stories in their communities. And it's essentially accountability to seeing those changes that you want, you know?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're your best project.
Right.
You have to do the work. Whether it feels uncomfortable or not, you have to do the work in order to heal or to prevent any trauma, for sure.
Healing is hard. It's hard. It ain't easy.
Work. So this is a question that I wanted to ask, especially to you. What questions should we be asking our therapists to ensure that they will uphold the significance of our racial traumas? Because, they're not always going to recognize or, maybe even understand our cultural differences, right?
And I think, starting by, and that's why, if you're apprehensive about getting therapy, interview these people, have multiple interviews or consultations with multiple therapists and ask them some of these questions. What work have you been doing personally to ensure that you're culturally competent in doing this work and making sure that you are recognizing people's differences and how that impacts how they show up in the world? So interviewing them, essentially, like the therapist may be asking you questions, but you can definitely come to them with some questions and asking them about their backgrounds, their history, how they incorporate that into their therapeutic style, and then starting to have these conversations from the beginning around race and its impacts, asking a therapist, how do they promote a safe environment for their clients to want to be able to open up about it, and acknowledging differences instead of, discrediting them and minimizing them. And, because that comes up a lot. Oh, racism doesn't exist anymore. That was over in the 60s. And, you know, oh, white privilege doesn't exist and all of these things. And it's like, you have not lived this life. You have not walked in my shoes, but you can do some work on your own, educate yourself, you know, doing the research, reading the books, you know, taking trainings. You know, there are so many trainings that you can take, especially as a clinician, to make sure that you can serve your community, you know, whether they are the same skin color as you or not, you know, but it's ultimately asking them, are they able to provide that space for you to really talk about those racial injustices and what we feel, what we experience from day to day, and normalizing and validating those experiences.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up a good point, because when I decided to go to therapy, I think for the first time in 2015, I remember thinking I absolutely needed a woman of color, wanted a woman of color, and I ended up getting a white male.
Ooh.
And I was like, no! Until I realized that he understood my trauma. He would tell me things like, you don't understand the power you have as a Black woman. And I was like, oh, excuse me, sir. Okay. Like, who are you hanging out with when we're not, you know? So don't be afraid to definitely interview the people and make sure that you're a fit. It really, at the end of the day, especially here in Canada, we're unfortunately not always going to find a therapist of the same background. But if you can find a common thread there, I think it's really, I think it's really, really powerful. I mean, to this day, I miss him. I actually miss him, and I miss the power that he put within me. And I think without going to therapy, the Village wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna send you his email, guys. You guys can thank him. Yeah, so we're done with the question portion for Kristin, but I would love for everybody to, you know, send over your questions. What other things are you thinking of? Let us know. Have Kristin as your resource while she's around and still willing to chat.
Yeah, and one more thing that I wanted to mention is utilizing your support network. Even if you aren't particularly asking for help from a professional, you have people who love you and care for you, you know, and they are there to support you. Use them.
Yeah.
You know, of course, if they aren't at a capacity to take that on, they'll hopefully let you know, and you can ask before seeking out that help from them, but utilize them. Lean on them especially during this time right now when all of us are feeling it.
Definitely. Somebody asked before, they said, what steps can you take if you feel symptoms of an anxiety attack?
Yeah. And what particular symptoms? I'm guessing, because a lot of times that manifests in the physical. So breathing changes, tightening in the chest and things like that. The anxious thoughts and like feeling panicked, you know, feeling panicked, feeling threatened. I think taking a breath, you know, taking a moment to let that feeling pass through your body, and sitting with it a bit, taking deep breaths. Meditation is good in those moments. A lot of times with my clients, I have them, you know, kind of like in those moments when those anxiety symptoms are heightened, it's kind of hard to kind of do the work of like challenging any anxious thoughts you may be experiencing. But as those physical symptoms start to come down a bit, you know, really checking in with yourself and where do I think this is coming from? You know, what was the root cause of this attack? What was I thinking in that moment? you know, and then really trying to challenge those anxious thoughts a bit to see if you can reframe them to be a bit more positive, because that can help alleviate anxiety. But it's often hard to do that in the moment. And a lot of times you just have to let that feeling pass, and, you know, reminding yourself that it is temporary, you know, it is a temporary feeling, and then trying to do that work to uncover a bit deeper as those physical feelings start to pass a bit.
Yeah, that's definitely great. Another question that we have is, do you think that clearing is a valid way to reduce the impacts of trauma?
What do I think that what is?
Clearing? I'm not sure what clearing is personally. Judy, can you let us know what you mean by clearing?
Right.
Yeah. For now, we'll move on. I find that I have a permanent grimace. How do I stop being angry all the time?
That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one, you know, but I think really like uncovering where that anger truly comes from, you know, and there's a lot, right? There's a lot of layers that contribute to that anger. But I think, you know, really sitting down and, like I said, journaling around those feelings, and seeing what comes up. A lot of times when I have clients write, things come out on that paper that they didn't even think they were thinking. They didn't even know they felt or that they were thinking. So really sitting down with that feeling, and like I said, gaining more clarity around that anger. And then, you know, finding little glimmers of hope, and really looking for positives in different situations, things that you can, you know, grab hold to. I know for me, gratitude is huge, like
Yeah.
expressing gratitude and really being intentional about pulling out those positives, you know, because it's easy for me to be mad, it's easy for me to complain and be negative and things like that, but we have to really take, you know, an effort, you know, make an effort to be intentional around pulling out those positive moments, those things that we can use in those moments where we are feeling all of the feelings.
Definitely. Another question asks, any tips for workplace racism? Tips on how to shift the policies and create spaces where Black people aren't in fear.
Yeah, I think that's huge, right? Because we often experience a lot of this stuff in the workplace. And I think getting to a place where you are, one, documenting things, documenting experiences that you're having, right? And then at some point, if you feel comfortable enough, going to someone who you trust in the organization. If you trust anyone, that's the hard part, right? Sometimes you don't even trust anyone in the organization, but if you can find one person that you have some sense of trust with to share these experiences, and I think right now is a great time it's an unfortunate time that we're in, but it's a great time to start airing out your grievances, you know, holding these people accountable to doing the work that they say they are committed to. You know, I've heard a lot of stories around these workplaces, you know, putting out these statements and saying they're wanting to support their communities of color in these organizations, but they're not really putting any action behind it. So holding them accountable to doing that work, speaking up, speaking out, you know, and oftentimes, unfortunately, you know, sometimes they try to push us out when we start speaking up. And you have to be cognizant of that, you know. But I'm not being silent anymore. Like, I'm sick of being silent. I'm speaking up when these things are occurring in my personal life, on the job, you know, in business situations. And then, like I said, utilizing your support network is important as well. because a lot of times you don't have that support in the workplace. So using outside supports to process experiences and things like that.
Yeah.
And like I said, speaking with someone that you're comfortable with at work, and doing your part, you know, and not feeling like we have to shrink and, you know, silence ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we feel like we can't go to any one of these jobs where we put, you know, dedicate so much time and energy into bringing them money, you know, bringing them clients, bringing them whatever it may be, and then we have no support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody else had asked, I was lucky enough to find a Black counselor, and I'm trying to get my employer to pay for her services as I've been paying out of my pocket. However, they want me to get one under their approved list of therapists. I was wondering if you have any tips on how to justify her service for me, especially with everything happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, because I'm pretty sure their approved list doesn't have, might not have anyone that you can connect with, you know, and who will be competent enough to address a lot of these. And I'm guessing you've already started seeing this therapist, already have built a rapport with this person, you know. So really expressing that you have a sense of trust with this person already. You're still, you know, getting the same services. Like, why I'm trying to figure out why you aren't able to be reimbursed. You know, or asking, you know, is there any way that, like, what are the qualifications of their list? You know, like what constitutes someone to be approved versus non-approved, and how can we get her on that list so I can continue to see her? Yeah. You know, just advocating for yourself and continuing to put up that fight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just going back to a question we had earlier about trauma, do you think that clearing is a valid way to reduce the impact of trauma? I'm assuming it means get rid of anything that's kind of triggering you. It was never clarified as to what the person meant. But do you think kind of relieving yourself of all the triggers helps with trauma?
I do in a sense, but I do think you also have to, you know, address, you know, where those traumas stem from, and really do that work on the psychological front, whether the trigger is present or not. You know, it can still haunt us. It can still haunt us, and then sometimes it's we're not able to get rid of all of the traumas or the triggers, right, that, you know, produce these traumas. You know, oftentimes we aren't able to escape some of these things, right? So I think it's really important to still do that active work of, you know, identifying these things, processing with loved ones, with a professional, and then learning coping mechanisms, you know, because unfortunately, we still have to live in this world where we're hated for the color of our skin, you know. So this isn't the last time that we're going to feel this, you know. This isn't the first time that we've experienced this individually and collectively, you know. So it's important that we are practicing, you know, radical self-care practices, you know, and really prioritizing ourselves in these moments.
Yeah, and something to add is just to do things that help you help you experience joy. If it's about turning off your TV, if it's about deleting Instagram for a little bit to kind of remove yourself from the triggers, or remove yourself from things that are just not serving you right now, that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Instagram will be there tomorrow. Take time. I mean, for myself, it took me to watch Insecure to feel good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I had to worry about Issa's life more than my own for the moment.
Uh-huh.
You know, so really just dive into things that make you feel good.
Right. And
Yeah.
anything that doesn't, walk away from it. Walk away from it. You are not obligated to engage in those things.
Yeah, yeah. One last question here is, how do we make therapy for members of the Black community? I don't understand. Hold on, let me see what they're asking first, and then I'll try to mix it. Okay, so how do we kind of get people in the Black community to embrace therapy? Because it's always seen as like a white thing.
Yeah, I think, continuing to speak out about it, sharing our experiences, because a lot of times it used to be like real hush hush and no one spoke. If they did go to therapy, they never spoke about it with loved ones. So like I said, sharing experiences, sharing the positive benefits that you've been able to achieve as a result of seeing a therapist, and then hopefully people start to take heed to that, because we ultimately can't force people to go to therapy. They have to make that decision on their own to decide, to seek a therapist. But if they were more educated on how it looked and got lived experiences from people who they already trust, right? Someone who they already trust is sharing with them about their experience with therapy, they're more likely to try it out.
Yeah, yeah. And I seem to have missed one question. It says, do you have any suggestions on approaching therapy for the first time? What to expect and how to start?
Yeah, so I think one, starting with identifying what you want from therapy is important. Mm-hmm. So even before you start looking for a therapist, jot down some things that you want to address in therapy, some of your goals, what your goals are, right? And then start doing research. So I know I heavily promote therapyforblackgirls.com as a resource to start looking for. I don't know if there's any people in Canada on that list or not. Do you know?
Yeah, we just provided a list specifically for Canada for the Black community.
Yeah. Okay, good. So looking at those directories, looking at those lists, and as you come into it, you already have a sense of what you want to get out of it, and you can read those bios and see what resonates with you. Look at their specialties and see if they have experience with working with whatever it is that you want to see changes.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times therapists offer free phone calls, free consultations. And like I said, interview them. They're wanting to get to know you and what your goals are and things like that. But you can ask them questions as well. What's your therapy style? Yeah. How do you show up for your clients? Mm-hmm. You can ask them, what their experience is and what their expertise is in that area that you're seeking help for. Yeah. You can really grill them, and you do not have to commit to one right away. Like I said, you can do that interviewing, and then once you do find someone that you're willing to set an appointment with, you are not obligated to stick with that person if you do not feel a connection, if you do not feel like they can provide you with what you're looking for. You don't have to stick. I know a lot of times people feel like they can't break up with their therapist, but you can walk away from them if you aren't getting your needs met.
Definitely.
And empower yourself to walk away if necessary.
Yeah, and it's also about what type of therapy you want to.
Yeah.
Do you need talk therapy? Or do you need your therapist to give you some homework?
Right.
To work on those things on your own. So it's really about you. I've only ever done talk therapy, so I can't really speak to anything else. Yeah. But sometimes just getting those emotions off your chest,
yes,
especially in a safe space where the person I mean, they might be judged. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but they can't judge you.
Right.
You're paying them to listen. So have to listen.
We are tuned in to you. That's your time, you know.
Yeah.
It's an investment, you know, and you are worth the investment. You are worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kristin, let us know how we can find you.
Yes.
You know, if we ever need to slide into your DMs for any more questions, or, you know, just follow your journey.
Yeah, so you can follow my practice Instagram at Her Therapy Space, and then my personal brand page is Kristin Winchester LPC. And then you can also find us on the interwebs at hertherapyspace.com. You know, we service women in the DC area, but we also have an online digital community where we, you know, help women, support women on a larger scale beyond the DC area. So you can check that out. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Great.
I'm open. If you have any questions, let me know. Shoot me a message. I'm here to support.
Definitely. Thank you so much for taking the time to really connect with our community and to speak to us. And it's refreshing to have a therapist that I could speak to that comes from, you know, similar age group, similar backgrounds. It's so important to really see yourself represented in so many spaces. So I really appreciate all the work that you do. And
likewise.
Yeah, it's beautiful when our communities can collide and we can support one another. Speaking of my community, you know, the Village is doing a lot right now. We're really trying to keep up with all the demand that you guys have for us. So we would definitely appreciate if you can, you know, donate to our cause so that we can help women of color who cannot afford the monetary burden that wellness often gives, right? So we are offering a subscription-based Trapsoul yoga at home. So that's really going to help a woman experience our yoga experiences without having to pay at all. So donations are definitely appreciated. We will have some more Village Talks, but we won't be doing it in the next 2 weeks. Rather, we're going to push it until July. Just take a little time to, you know, take care of self, Kim and I, and really make sure this Trapsoul yoga thing pops off the right way. So if you're interested in subscribing, we have the link in the chat. It's a subscription-based yoga at home from Kim and I, which is our namesake. Trapsoul Yoga has been our baby since 2017. So it's really great that you can experience this in the comfort of your own home. Yeah. And by the way, if you've missed the last Village Talks conversation, you can actually find us on Spotify and Apple. So yeah, we have some great conversations about emotional wellness, nutrition, meditation, finance. So yes, definitely look up Village Talk and you'll find our old episodes, and you'll find Kristin's within the next few days as well. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Kristin,
yes,
thank you again for lending your time and your expertise to us.
No problem.
You know, as people in wellness, as healers, as listeners, it can get a little exhausting. So I definitely urge you to take some time for yourself and to rest.
Right, and y'all had me crying on here.
Well, I mean, I would love to do that again in the future. So we'll definitely keep in touch with you. And
yes.
Thank you again. So, yeah, let's keep in touch.
Yes. Thank you everyone for joining.
Yes. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.